On March 29, 2015, an Air Canada Airbus A320 was on a scheduled flight from Toronto to Halifax, Nova Scotia, with 133 passengers and 5 crew members on board. At midnight, while conducting a non-precision approach to runway 05, the aircraft severed power lines, then struck the snow-covered ground about 740 feet before the runway threshold. The aircraft continued airborne through the localizer antenna array, then struck the ground twice more before sliding along the runway. It came to rest on the left side of the runway, about 1,900 feet beyond the threshold. Let's find out how this happened. The flight route was supposed to go west over wintry Canada. With a travel time of just under 2 hours, the flight was scheduled to land in Halifax shortly after midnight. At a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet and a distance of 720 miles. There was more fuel on the board than necessary because a larger reserve was needed due to the bad weather. Furthermore, the captain took over the flying because he already foresaw a difficult landing. The aircraft was a 24-year-old Airbus A320 with over 75,000 flight hours. However, this aircraft was not equipped for our RNAV area navigation approaches, which would have been important later in the flight. During the climb, the flight crew discussed amending the planned alternate airport to Moncton International Airport, as this change would allow more time to hold at Halifax if landing were delayed to wait for the weather to improve. Based on the weather forecast, the flight crew determined that they would conduct the localizer approach to runway 05 in Halifax. At about 22:56, Air Canada Dispatch provided the flight crew with weather updates and advised that, at 22:30, an Air Canada flight had landed in Halifax on runway 05 after carrying out a missed approach due to insufficient visibility. Meanwhile, Air Canada 624 reached the cruising altitude of 35,000 feet and the flight attendants prepared for the service.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again from the flight deck, Captain speaking. We've just reached our cruising altitude before the flight. As it begins to settle in, I do want to remind you to please keep your seat elbows clear from the aisle as the flight attendants will be coming through the cabin with galley carts shortly. Also, one more reminder to please refrain from congregating near the front galley where the flight deck door is located. Thank you.
The weather situation at Halifax Airport was not optimal, wind speed of 20 knots from 350 degrees, heavy snowfall and visibility less than 1 mile. The only runway that was available due to the wind direction was 05. Another disadvantage was that the automatic instrument landing system was not available on runway 05, which meant that the pilots had to land according to visual flight rules. Furthermore, the runway lighting was not set to maximum brightness, which also made an approach with low visibility difficult. What do we know about the pilots? The captain had been with Air Canada for more than 9 years and had logged 11,765 flight hours. The first officer had been with the airline for 15 years and had 11,300 flight hours. So it was a very experienced crew. At 23:21, about 2 minutes after the flight was cleared to descend to flight level 290, the flight crew carried out the approach briefing for a non-precision localizer approach to runway 05, followed by the pre-descent checklist. The approach was to be coupled with a manual landing.
From the flight deck, ladies and gentlemen, as you may have noticed, we have begun our initial descent down to our destination. Now would be a good time to wrap up any business you need to take care of as we prepare for our approach. If you are up, once you return to your seat, we ask that you remain seated until the aircraft arrives safely at the gate. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival.
During the descent, the flight crew discussed holding requirements and then contacted the Halifax Terminal Air Traffic Controller to request a holding pattern until the weather improved. The Terminal Air Traffic Controller cleared Air Canada 624 to hold at 9,000 feet. The flight crew determined that there was enough fuel to remain in the hold until 1 o'clock. At 23:34, the flight crew contacted the Halifax Tower for an update on the weather and runway conditions. The tower controller advised that the reported visibility was still 1/4 SM and that vehicles were continuing to remove snow from the runway. About 5 minutes later, the aircraft entered the hold. At 23:43, the flight crew began the in-range checks, which included extending the landing lights to on. The pilot flying subsequently indicated that he might want the landing lights selected off during the approach to avoid reflections from the snowstorm. The cabin crew then made a passenger announcement, which included instructing passengers to stow their carry-on baggage, put their seatbacks upright, and fasten their seatbelts. The cabin crew subsequently confirmed that these actions had been taken. At 0016, the tower controller advised the flight crew information that visibility was half a mile in snow and drifting snow and that vertical visibility was 300 feet. Based on the improvement in visibility to the required minimum, the flight crew determined that they would continue and carry out an approach to runway 05.
Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.
At 0023, Air Canada 624 leveled off at 3,400 feet about 12 miles from the threshold. Once level, with the autopilot on and the flight director lateral mode selected to localizer track mode, the flight crew began to configure the aircraft for the descent. What exactly happened in the final minutes of the final approach? At 0027, about 6.7 miles from the runway threshold, the flaps were set to flaps 3 followed by flaps full and the gear down. The aircraft was fully configured for landing before the final approach fix. At 0.3 miles before the final approach fix, the flying pilot turned the autopilot descent knob to select -3.5 degrees. The air traffic controller gave Air Canada 624 clearance to land. The aircraft started to descend about 0.2 miles from the final approach fix. The aircraft crossed the fix at 2,170 feet indicated altitude. But now the incredible happened. As the aircraft descended, the actual flight path diverged from the desired profile as a result of wind variations. The divergence continued to increase throughout the approach. The airspeed was constant, and the vertical descent speed ranged between 700 and 800 feet per minute. Due to the poor visibility, the pilots did not notice this change. When the aircraft was approximately 0.7 miles from the threshold, the flight crew had a conversation in which they both confirmed that they could see some approach lights. At this point the aircraft passed over a lighted facility which was mistaken for the landing lights. The pilots noticed the error seconds before touchdown. The pilot moved the thrust levers to the go-around position and pulled the control stick up. But it was too late.
Sink. Pull up. Don't sink. Pull up. Don't sink. Pull up.
50.
Don't sink.
10, 5.
Until the antenna array at the south end of that runway is replaced. So what that means is in favorable weather conditions, the main runway would be available to us. And when I talk about favorable, it's visibility and wind direction and this type of thing. So now...
What if the weather conditions are bad and you need to use that navigational equipment? That means no, I suppose.
Well, that means it would be, it would have limited availability. Now, we do have another runway, 1432, which has been in operation since early Sunday morning. And right now, for example, the winds are light and they're favoring that runway. So all of our operations are on that runway.
And
so what it means for passengers...
Can I just jump in just before we get to that? Just that runway that you do have operational and where planes are flying, that's shorter. Is that having any bearing on planes that can come in or out of Stanfield at this point?
No,
No,
it's
okay.
not.
Full operation on that runway.